Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gents. This is Defub21, and before us we have the PS5 technical presentation, which is just been broadcast. I haven't looked at it yet. I thought we should do that, and I can give you my honest opinion on it. So, without further ado, let us take a look. Or take a look.
Hi, I'm Mark Cerny. I'm excited to be here to talk about the newest addition to our console lineup, PlayStation 5 Pro, and how it advances gaming technology.
Okay.
But first, I want to take just a minute to look at what we put in the original PlayStation 5 and how it delivers an exceptional gaming
Very good image quality. 1440p on my end. You'll only be seeing it in 1080. I apologize. But
when PS5 debuted in 2020, it brought a lot to the table. 8 Zen 2 CPU cores form the brains of PlayStation 5 and enable high-speed complex gameplay, with character counts reaching into the hundreds and frame rates that can be as high as 120 frames a second. PS5 has a powerful RDNA 2 GPU, which can render anything from intricate
This is a
details
technical demo for
to
Unreal Engine
fantastic
5 just
worlds
there.
with vast panoramas to explore. Ray tracing allows for dramatic visual improvements, including reflections off of water or glass, and the realism that comes from real-time global illumination. A custom SSD can load data at breathtaking speed, resulting in ultra-fast transitions between game worlds and data streaming rates so high that traversal speeds are essentially unlimited.
You okay? I'm working on it!
Tempest 3D audio tech brings an unparalleled sense of immersion to the sound of the games. With audio so real, you may not even need to see the enemies to know exactly where they are.
Very fancy.
Finally, the DualSense controller has haptics that let you feel through your hands what your character is experiencing inside of the game.
In most of these games, we've
It's
seen
wonderful to see
cross-gen
such
using
variety
last-gen
and richness
engines.
of game experiences. Creators have made amazing use of the hardware capabilities, but when I talk to them, I do hear about their desire for more graphics performance. The dreams of the developers are bigger than can be supported at 60 frames per second, and that leads to an aspect of modern gaming that we're all familiar with: graphics modes. It can be a difficult choice for players. Fidelity modes emphasize the visuals, typically through higher resolution rendering. These modes might also have enhanced detail or use more ray tracing. But the games only run at 30 frames per second. The visuals can be choppier and the controls less responsive. Performance modes emphasize frame rate and interactivity, typically choosing to run at 60 frames per second.
Again, this is a last-gen game as well.
Mainly by reducing the graphical detail until those frame rates can be achieved. When asked to decide on a mode, players are choosing performance about 3/4 of the time. Removing that decision, or at least narrowing that divide, is one of the key targets for PlayStation 5 Pro. We want to give players the graphics that the game creators aspire to, at the high frame rates that players typically prefer. To do that, PS5 Pro substantially improves over PlayStation 5 in 3 ways. Here's what we call the Big 3. First, we made the GPU much larger and increased the speed of the memory it uses. The result is rendering that's up to 45% faster.
Okay.
Second, we made major upgrades to the ray tracing, taking a streamlined and accelerated approach that allows calculation of the rays at double or even triple the speeds of PlayStation 5.
Okay.
And finally, we added custom hardware for machine
So in
learning
essence,
and an AI library called PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, or PSSR for short. PSSR analyzes the game images pixel by pixel and can add an extraordinary amount of detail, which boosts the effective resolution of the games. Game creators are adding PS5 Pro support to new and existing titles, and with the Big 3 involved, the results can be pretty amazing, with graphics showing something like fidelity levels of detail, but at double the frame rate. Here's The Last of Us Part 2 running on PS5 Pro. It has huge amounts of detail and targets.
Again, this
super
is a
smooth
last-gen
60
engine.
frames per second.
Unless this is the remake. They remade this game, didn't they? Yeah.
Let's compare this to the fidelity mode on PS5, which is only running at 30 frames per second and is therefore much choppier.
Don't stop! We gotta lose.
This goal of delivering almost fidelity-like graphics at performance frame rates has been achieved for a broad set of titles, including Marvel's Spider-Man 2
Okay.
and
So
Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. We can see that PS5 Pro is close to doubling the power of PlayStation 5. Another way to compare the two consoles is to look at PS5 Pro versus Performance mode on PS5, both of which target 60 frames per second. What we see here is a difference in detail. PS5 Pro is much sharper and crisper than PS5. For this, my favorite is the parade scene from Ratchet & Clank. Distant details are much clearer. And here we can see Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is noticeably higher resolution throughout the scene, including the trees and procedural cars. So overall, some remarkable improvement to the games. On PS5 Pro, we can see increased sharpness to the graphics or smoother and more responsive gameplay. This is the big three showing their value. As you've been seeing, machine learning via the PSSR library is being used quite broadly to add pixel detail and boost frame rate. But there are as many approaches as there are game engines. The increase in raw GPU power is being especially effective for Horizon Forbidden West. Apart from the detail boost, that extra graphics power is allowing for improvements to lighting and visual effects, as well as to the hair and the skin in cinematics.
again, the base
Open up
game
this.
of this is a
George
cross-gen title that came out. I think it came out in PS4, or if it didn't, it's still
Ray
using a
tracing is
last-gen
finding
engine,
broad
just been
usage
pushed
as
to
well,
higher hardware
particularly
limits.
when the games are focused on higher frame rates. The faster hardware in PS5 Pro can make a real difference, allowing Gran Turismo 7 to add ray-traced reflections between the cars in gameplay, while continuing to support their targeted 60 frames per second. That boost in ray tracing is also delivering big wins for Hogwarts Legacy, allowing not only for better reflections and a greater variety of reflective surfaces, but also for further realism in the casting of shadows. I hope you've enjoyed this run-through of the technology behind PlayStation 5 Pro. Simply put, it's the most powerful console we've ever built, and a worthy addition to the PS5.
This is
family.
very short.
Let me wrap this up by giving you a quick look at a number of games running on the new console.
You'll never break
Okay.
case. They don't know we are. We legendary.
Yeah, so the leaks are accurate.
Don't let me hang.
Again, this is effective. That game, yeah. A lot of what you're seeing here could be classed as either cross-gen games or games running on effectively last-gen engines but made for current-gen hardware.
Did I do it? Oh, what is this?
In other words, well, what to think. Ooh, there was a price back there. Okay, $700, 800 euros. So it's like, just to be clear, 699 is not, maybe I haven't checked the exchange rate between the euro and the dollar lately, but it's literally €800, so it's definitely about £100 more expensive in Eurozone land, which includes poor little Ireland, than it is in the US. Pound sterling is a more valuable currency, but still that is a not insignificant amount of money. And it's coming November the 7th. I could buy, again, in Eurozone land, I could buy myself a 40 series. Actually, I haven't really checked the pricing lately because, again, these days the new, particularly Nvidia cards, are preposterously expensive. But I could certainly buy myself like a 16 gig capacity AMD GPU, if not a 16 gig Nvidia one, for that kind of money. That's what, 4070 Ti kind of money, maybe, for that same amount of cash. Now, I know there's been inflation and so on, and that's driven up prices, and I think they've raised the price once or more than once on the base PlayStation 5. But that is, again, for the Eurozone, it's less than $200 more expensive than PS5 in the US. I mean, I think PlayStation 5 is like 500. I would say 550 US, or I think it's around €550 anyway for the base PlayStation 5. But yeah, that is so yeah, 100 down to 700 is 200. That's give or take €250 price hike all over the Eurozone PS5, and that's again it actually, to note it, there's no appearance of a optical disc version, although again the most recent slim version of the PS5 standard PlayStation 5, that's modular, so I assume that's the case with the Pro. So it's possible the PS5 Pro doesn't come with a disc drive, which again for me would be, and you're charging €800 for a PlayStation 5 Pro with no optical disc drive. We might get more information or elaboration on that. I'll have to go investigating on the internet, but that is a significant price hike. Now, admittedly, it's got AI hardware acceleration tech in it, significantly beefed up GPU. There was nothing mentioned about the CPU. And from what I gather from looking at, say, Digital Foundry as an example, they recently had a review of Space Marine 2, and apparently there are places where that game, even in the performance mode, will not run at 60 FPS on base PS5 when it will, or just about will, with some drops on Series X. Not because of graphics limitations, but kind of limitations on the CPU side. In other words, when you got large swarms of enemies on screen, it's very CPU intensive in that game. And it can result in, like, when the very large scale scenes we were seeing literally hundreds of baddies on screen, you're getting sub 60 FPS even in performance mode because of CPU limitations. There was no mention that I could see there. Please correct me in the comments below if I'm wrong about an upgrade to the CPU. They could go from Ryzen 2 to Ryzen 4 maybe, and that would get you a big jump potentially in IPC, although again, I'm not sure on the comparisons between Ryzen 2 and Ryzen 4 there, again off the top of my head. But in essence, they seem to be selling the PS5 Pro as a lot of people, including myself, were expecting a potential, option way the PlayStation 4 Pro would function, and the way some people anticipate the Xbox One X would function, which is that you could play the games at a higher resolution, but there might also be an option to play the games at the same resolution as standard PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, but at a much higher frame rate. But that, again, didn't turn out to be the case. For those who aren't aware, from a technology standpoint, the last gen systems were, on the frame rate side, bottlenecked by their Jaguar Core CPUs, which were the least powerful upgrade of the hardware compared to 360 and PlayStation 3, with most of the real-world performance gains not being through additional raw grunt on CPU compared to the previous gen, but just the CPU architecture just being much, much more efficient. Being on the same chip as the memory controller, having out-of-order execution functionality so it could carry out instructions while it was waiting for information to arrive to carry out complete other existing instructions in the pipeline and so on. At least that's a layman's terms interpretation of things. So they seem to be, selling this as this is your, there's there'll be a fidelity mode, but they really seem to be selling this on frame rate. So you can basically have your fidelity mode as on standard PlayStation 5, but at 60 FPS with a combination of hardware acceleration for AI hardware acceleration for, effectively NVIDIA DLSS grade image upscaling acceleration enabled by hardware acceleration for AI machine learning algorithms in this in the PS5 Pro, along with 45% boost on the GPU side and faster RAM, meaning more bandwidth, to get to 60 FPS at what will look like the same image resolution as PlayStation 5, standard PlayStation 5 in fidelity mode, but will probably be running at a native resolution well below what you would see the native render resolution on PS5. But it's up hardware AI upscaled to 4K or whatever, or 1440p or 1080p, whatever the resolution of the screen your console is plugged into. So PS5 Pro seems to be what a lot of people were hoping PS4 Pro would be, which is, or at least give you the option to have run your game at a much higher frame rate than the base hardware. It wasn't possible on PS4 Pro because they didn't have the CPU for that. Same for the Xbox One X. But again, the CPU setup in PS5 and Xbox Series S and X is a much bigger upgrade over PS4 and Xbox One than PS4 and Xbox One were over 360 and PlayStation 3. But this is that seems to be, this is the kind of the heir to expectations for PS4 Pro before they actually hit the market. The one criticism, apart from the price, I would imagine I would be suspicious, particularly at that €800 price point for the Eurozone, $699 for the UK, $699 for the US, is that this hardware is not just being sold at break even, that this hardware is being sold at a profit. Potentially, $50 to $100 maybe, /euros /pound sterling, which would be a big margin by industry standards. For a hardware launch, and I would expect Sony and will keep that hardware at that price for as long as they can to kind of squeeze as much money out of the consumer as they can possibly get away with. I don't know what the general kind of consumer / market reaction to this is going to be at that price point, but again, gone off topic a bit. The criticism I would make is that the games they were showing us, I'm pretty sure Forbidden West was cross-gen, although don't quote me on that, but we were seeing other kind of cross-gen titles that came out on last-gen hardware. I'm pretty sure the Harry Potter game came out on last-gen hardware. There again are other games shown that are either A, cross-gen or are technically current gen but are running in a last-gen engine, like say Unreal Engine 4 games built for PS5 and Series S and X from the ground up. And therefore, and this is kind of the elephant in the room, so far this generation has been, in my opinion, terrible, possibly the worst console generation in a very long time, because to be perfectly blunt, COVID seems to have massively disrupted development, not just of games, but of true next-gen engines. We have not seen a particularly large number of Unreal Engine 5 games, considering how far we are into the generation. And many of those Unreal Engine 5 games that we have seen, or games using comparable, similarly new advanced game engines, would have had advanced features, disabled. In other words, not used in the games at all, because either they weren't ready for showtime, in other words, they didn't run fast enough or well enough to allow for the performance needed in the game. I apologize if you hear any noise in the background. I am dog sitting and the dog is making some noise. But if you'd shown me video footage of either some currently announced but not yet out or some next gen title, or some actual true next gen titles running next gen engines that either have or haven't been announced that are coming now or this year, or say first half next year, running at 60 FPS, I would be more convinced. But a lot of the games shown were games were already out. I think some of them were cross-gen or were built using last generation engines. Like, we didn't see Black Myth Wukong is an example. Is it how you pronounce it? Wukong, which is an Unreal Engine 5 game. They didn't show that running on PS5 Pro, and that game came out recently and has done very well in terms of sales, done quite well for reviews, particularly for a brand new kind of AAA developer. We also didn't see them showing Space Marine 2, which I'm not sure if it's using either a cross-gen engine or maybe even a last-gen engine that they've heavily updated, but it's from what I've seen of it, a very visually impressive game. Very expensive on PC as well, so I've got a large back catalogue, so I won't be buying that now, unless I get some FOMO from my fear of missing out from my inner circle. I want to play multiplayer on it or something. But there was nothing in this video that wowed me. Nothing that I could see showing the game, or showing a game that is either out already that's very technically challenging, and that we know doesn't hit 60 FPS or has a hard time keeping it even at lower in a performance mode on the standard PlayStation 5. Again, noting one of the examples of that being again Space Marine 2 that came out recently. And my concern over the 60 FPS claims, again, comes down to the CPU, which they didn't mention anything about. So, yes, they might be claiming 60 FPS gaming at 4K, but if Space Marine 2 is CPU limited in certain scenes on PS5 and on Series S and X, where they're not getting 60 frames per second locked because things are slowing down on the CPU side. Again, I apologize if you heard that. The dog is in a bit of a mood. We could, be in a situation where people are going out and spending €800 on the PS5 Pro, only being promised 60 FPS, only to start seeing games turning up that won't run at 60 FPS because of CPU limitations. And they didn't mention any upgrades to that. And that would be, that to me would be a question mark over this hardware, particularly exacerbated by its high price. And the fact that, again, they didn't show us any, like some of the stuff you saw very early on in this video of showing quote-unquote gameplay wasn't gameplay at all. It was Unreal Engine 5 technical demo footage, not actually, footage from an actual in-game. Like, you see those kind of bits where you've got fast-moving day-night transitions in Unreal Engine, and what was in kind of this kind of deserty, sandy, a cave environment. That's an Unreal 5 tech demo, not a real game. And I don't, if you wanted to convince me this was definitely going to be 60 FPS, you had to show me a high-end Unreal Engine 5 game running at 60 FPS with all the advanced features, lumen lighting system or ray tracing, mesh shader rendering, all those features active and running at 60 FPS, and either for Unreal Engine 5 or a comparable new generation engine, or must have been heavily upgraded to get those features. And they didn't do that. They didn't do that at all. And yeah, I'm pretty sure now, think about it, for Horizon Forbidden West, the base game itself, DLC came out later on that was PS5 only, but the base game was cross-gen. And so again, that leads me to be suspicious. Is this, again, there are games that probably would have come out last year, maybe even 2 years ago, if it weren't for disruptions caused by something I mentioned. In other words, the algorithm might not like me talking about in retrospect, it wasn't a good idea to mention them. That might push this hardware to the point, this hardware to the point where getting 60 FPS, even with image upscaling from say 1080p native render resolution, would be beyond the hardware, depending on how challenging or technically challenging the engine is, and or how optimized or not it is for the gamer games. So for that price point, there's a serious question mark over it. I don't have any of the current gen consoles. I got a PC gaming rig. I recently put a AM4 Ryzen. It's got a 5800X 3D CPU in it now, which is a pretty big upgrade. I've got 32 gigs of RAM. I've only got an RX 5000 or 700 XT graphics card, which will need to be updated at some point. And I could get, particularly on the second-hand market, particularly if the 50 series NVIDIA cards are coming soon, which you'll probably see the 40 series stuff drop in price quite a bit, both new sale and on the second-hand market on eBay. €800 would get me a pretty serious, certainly by my standards, new gaming GPU. And considering also how expensive the PlayStation games can be compared to PC, although PC prices have gone up as well, you know, that's quite the ask in terms of price. And I don't think they did a very good job. Again, show me a true next-gen game that pushes the hardware to the limits, running at 60 FPS, and maybe, again, for someone who's already, who's got the money, or is primarily a console gamer, you might convince them. Again, me with my PC and want to upgrade my PC further, that probably wouldn't be enough. But this is, it's a very short, it's short on hype video, it's short on hype, it's short on showing very technically high-end gaming graphics in an actual game. Again, no Wukong, no Space Marine 2, nothing we're expecting for the rest of the year or into next year being shown running at 60 FPS, but games that are out already, that are either cross-gen or running on a last-gen engine but used to build a game for current-gen only hardware. And that's not very convincing as far as I'm concerned. Anywho, that is me ranting on, hopefully not boringly, about this. Not good enough. Not good enough at all. It's out in November. That is like 6, maybe even €700. Okay, but that is €800. Anyone who's got a gaming PC going to be looking at that Eurozone price in particular, and I can imagine what the Brits and the American reaction will be. Considering the launch price of the base PS5 was $500, I think about £500 sterling in the UK. That's a 200 price increase, which isn't too bad considering all the inflation we've had, and that this is a powerful piece of hardware and may have a new completely separate chip in it for the AI hardware acceleration, so on and so forth. But €800, that is, let me do the math here, I'm terrible at math. Yeah, it's a €300 price bump over the base PlayStation 5. Now, if you've got a standard PS5 and you can trade it in and you can get like €300 to €400 for it, maybe. But anyone with a rig, anyone who's, looking to upgrade their graphics card in the no competition, sky high prices market we've been stuck with for the last couple of years, that's money that could be spent better elsewhere. And then you've got PC games which are a lot cheaper, and your existing PC library of games and so on. Anyway, the price point, lack of mention of an optical drive, lack of mention of a CPU upgrade that could handle games that might be CPU limited on base PS5. lack of showing off actual gameplay in, as far as I could tell, in an Unreal Engine 5 game with all the features engaged. Again, no Wukong for that, or any other games running in as far as I'm aware, are next gen engines, or should I say current gen engines at this point, with everything, all the bells and whistles active, leaves me quite frankly suspicious about what you're actually going to get from this. And considering that we're now, I mean, these systems came out in, when did they come out? They came out in 2019, 2020. So we're basically at the end of this year, will be 4 years, 4 years into the generation. And it's been, again, a bad generation, but this is a, a lot of questions. Very high price point, particularly in the Eurozone. I'm suspicious that maybe Sony's thrown a 50 to 100 profit margin into at least the Eurozone price, possibly also the UK and US, which is miserly of them. But for that price, they didn't do enough convincing. There wasn't enough kind of shock and awe amazement. And there's a lot of, again, open questions. Where's the disc? If this is €800 and there's no disc drive as standard, they can F right off. And I wouldn't be surprised if both the Brits and the Yanks thought the same. And yeah, just not enough. The games, they didn't show off the gameplay of actual modern, technologically modern / top of the line titles to convince me that this game will actually run those games at 60 FPS. Anywho, this is Defub21. Let me know what you think below in the comments, both to give me feedback, which I will respond to, and also appease the algorithm gods. Like the video, again, also to appease the algorithm gods. And I will respond to comments in this video. Please let me know your thoughts. Any angles that I haven't looked at it from, please let me know. And this is Defub21 signing off. Toodaloo.